Libya's government moves to get the country's armed militias in line after a string of violent attacks. But how risky could this be, and is it strong enough to enforce law and order? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Hazem Sika. 48 hours, that is the deadline for all rogue militias to disband in Libya as the new president bows to public pressure. The decision came amid growing public anger at armed factions and Islamist groups, many of whom have been operating with impunity in Libya for months now.
We're disbanding all the armed groups that do not fall under the authority of the government. We're also banning the use of violence and carrying of weapons in public places. It is also illegal to set up checkpoints. We've instructed the appropriate government agencies to ensure that these directives are implemented.
So far, the Libyan government has been unable to clamp down on militia groups, but the latest announcement comes as 30,000 protesters gathered in Benghazi on Friday. They stormed the headquarters of Ansar al-Sharia, demanding militia groups be disbanded in Libya. On Saturday, they had been driven out. Two more groups in the eastern town of Derna have now voluntarily stepped aside. Authorities have relied on militias to plug the security gap in Libya. Disbanding them may be the government's biggest challenge yet. Let's take a look. Post-Gaddafi Libya is littered with armed groups, many of whom took part in the revolution. While some are considered illegitimate, others are under the command of the Defense Ministry. And despite repeated calls to disband them, many worry about what will happen to the well-armed fighters that make up their ranks. Well, let's take a look at some of the main groups more specifically. The February 17th Brigade is the most powerful. They played an important role in the revolution and still enjoy public support. Ansar al-Sharia have been widely condemned in recent days. They are suspected by some of being behind the attacks on the US consulate that killed the ambassador. And the Rafallah Sahati Brigade are also among the most powerful. They provided security during the recent elections. So, can the Libyan government stand up to the armed militias? Well, to help us answer this question and a whole lot more, we're joined by our guests in Benghazi, Faraj Najam, a Libyan historian and author of Tribes, Islam and State in Libya. In Doha, we have Osama Kubbar, political analyst and a former spokesperson for the Zawiya Brigade, one of the militia groups in Libya. Also in Doha, Tarik Yousef, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution. Tarik specializes in the political economy and is a former IMF and World Bank economist. Good to have you all with us, gentlemen. Faraj Najam, if I could start with you. Give us a sense of what the security situation is like right now in Benghazi. And Mohammed al-Magariaf, the Libyan president, has ordered all of the country's militias to either come under their jurisdiction or be disbanded. Do you believe that will happen?
I think what happened on Friday evening, I think this will ultimately happen. Benghazi now is quiet. However, things are at a personal level are quite safe, but everyone is cautious. Mainly those militiamen, the revolutionary brigades. Obviously, they've got a very stern message on Friday evening that if they do not disband or join the army as individuals, they have lost the trust but also the confidence of people, and this could be costly. But again, Benghazi proven again to be the hub of revolution, ready to jump again if needed to, and resort to violence if this happens. So people in Benghazi are not frightened or threatened or patronized by arms anymore, and they are willing to take on those armed men if they do not fall into ranks and join the construction of proper state organs, i.e. army and security apparatus.
Tarik Yousef, the issue of security in Libya is unfortunately not a new one. Ever since the fall of Gaddafi's regime almost a year ago, it's been one of growing concern for people there. Why are things different this time around? Why should anyone believe that the government, when they say that this time they will try to get these armed groups in line?
I think because you have a combination of factors which perhaps before did not exist, and this is happening against the background of immense political pressure, especially on the popular side, streets, as has been suggested already, are expressing in the most unequivocal terms their dislike and their rejection of the state of lawlessness, or the perception that the country continues to be run in a way where the state has a minimal role. Some of these factors have to do, I would argue, with the recent destruction, the tragic destruction of some of the shrines that took place across the country. And secondly, more importantly, perhaps recently, was the assassination of the American ambassador and some of his colleagues. These two factors, I think, crystallized to most Libyans the reality of the weak state of lawlessness, and provided a bedrock of pressure for newly elected leaders who now have the legitimacy to make demands, to make promises, and to actually bring whatever organs of the state they have at their disposal to ensure that everyone conforms to the new rules that were set in place in the last 24 hours. I think that is what is different today about the reality relative to just a year ago.
Do you feel that this time around they have the backing of more of the people now? I mean, after what we saw on Friday, we saw something of what was many people termed people power, protesters, ordinary people in Benghazi seemingly taking matters into their own hands. Is that a source of encouragement for you?
I think it's a source of huge encouragement. After all, in a state of vulnerability and volatility where state institutions remain weak, and some of the new elected leaders have been untested, popular pressure, popular support, and open demands, as has been suggested ago. Benghazi has again revolted, in this case calling for the salvation of the city, for cleaning up the city, and for the state to assume its rightful and dutiful responsibilities. That changes immensely the parameters of the game. And I think it gives the leaders, the newly elected leaders, a chance, a fighting chance, a legitimate chance to bring all the parties together and to ensure that this is a new beginning, and one that hopefully will be credible and where the results will be seen on the ground rather soon. I would argue the pressures are also coming from abroad. You've seen a number of countries looking at Libya recently and asking the question, has this revolution been supported, if only to see perhaps criminal elements, terrorist elements come in and occupy and inflict damage on foreign guests and foreign assets. And so all of this combined, in my view, provides, I would argue, a perfect storm for change to begin, and a credible change, persistent change, consistent change by elected leaders who have legitimacy.
Osama Kubbar, there seems to be a fine line here between the independent militias and those who say they operate under the government's command. But I want to ask you, as someone who has represented one of these groups, is it entirely clear with these groups where some of their loyalties really lie?
Absolutely. Like the time now is different than like few months back. We have a legitimately elected parliament, and we have a legitimately elected president. So things are really changed. People are really well aware now of the situation, and many of the legitimate brigades are basically paying loyalty to the country and to the people. There are few who are really outlawed, and I think this is where the street really moved against those illegitimate brigades. But the rest of the brigades, I can assure you, they are absolutely with the people, absolutely with the revolution, and they wanted to protect the people and protect the movement.
Faraj Najam, as someone who studied this with regard to Libya's various tribal divisions, to what extent do tribal loyalties play into this? Are these armed groups shaped along tribal lines?
Well, I think one of the disadvantages that these groups now they have procured over the last few months is the loss of confidence of tribes. We've seen this just in the south of Benghazi, in a place called Rajma, when some of these fringe Islamic groups tried and succeeded in destroying one of the shrines, and you had the tribe there living around that area coming out in full force, and they killed a few of them, captured a few, and they destroyed their cars, and they basically driven them out. So the tribesmen are playing another role, as they traditionally have played in supporting the state. But also I must say there are another whole of people who are emerging as a power in the ground, and that's the role of the NGOs. NGOs now in Libya, which is a new phenomena, now they're playing a major role in combating, but also in standing face to face to these armed men. And what they did on Friday was incredible. They managed to mobilize half of the city into the main Freedom Square, and also they made it loud and clear that these armed men are not accepted. Obviously some of them, they got out of order, and then they start attacking these brigades, and as a result we lost about 10 people. But again, you have new emerging forces. So it isn't just those revolutionary brigades or the militiamen who have the upper hand, but also the tribesmen, but also the NGOs.
Osama Kubbar, isn't it the case that, I mean, you talked earlier about the fact that you believe some of these brigades will, in your opinion, fall into line, but isn't it the case that the political vacuum at the heart of Libya's government remains, and some of the other groups, the Islamists, the more extreme elements, as some would put them, they have some powerful political allies, don't they?
They do. We need to differentiate between two different kind of brigades or outlawed. There are those who really pay allegiance to certain people, and there are those who are really pay allegiance to the religion. Okay. So the one with the religion, I guess they just stick to each other and they just pay allegiance to their commander. But the other ones, like there are people in the government, or there are people just on the skirt of the government, who they do have brigades supporting them, and these brigades, they really listen to those kind of political personnel. And I'm really surprised, like with what happened in Benghazi and in the other cities, that there are certain brigades have not been mentioned or brought up, and these brigades actually they are the most really feared, or the one that really most of the Libyan fear their artillery.
Tarik Yousef, I want to ask you about some of these attacks that have been widely believed to be the work of Gaddafi loyalists. Certainly, a number of people in the current Libyan government think so, since they've targeted top commanders of Gaddafi's former army who defected to the other side. Does that narrative, though, serve the interests of the government?
I think we need to recognize that it does serve the interests of many people in government. It probably serves the interests of those who provide the political protection for some of the militias that operate under their command, even if indirect. The investigation is ongoing from what we can hear, and I think the results of this investigation have to be shared with the public in a transparent manner. More importantly, as the army begins to come together, as state institutions begin to affirm their authority, it will be very difficult then to blame everything on the remnants of the old regime, and to begin to face perhaps the tough questions of who inside many of these brigades, some of the militias, or other rogue elements within the state apparatus that could possibly be responsible for other acts of criminality that are being blamed now very conveniently on the remnants of the old regime. This is not to suggest that the remnants of the old regime do not have a plan, or not regrouping and perhaps trying to inflict damage. But this is getting mixed up with a lot of other potential areas of vulnerability, including collusion between rogue elements and people in the security apparatus. That is the other alternative narrative that one hears about and hears from a lot of Libyans, including in Benghazi, and people are extremely concerned about this.
Faraj Najam, should we be surprised at all by what's transpired in Libya over the last few months, over the last year, given the fact that Gaddafi ruled the country for something like 40 years and didn't really build any strong national institutions in the country?
No, I don't think we should be surprised at all. I'm expecting a few things worse than this, and I'm expecting it again from this very city. The city, wrongly or rightly, feels that it's marginalized. It feels that it has not been given the attention that it deserved, and I've said it over and over again. I personally Well, last night we were in a meeting with the Congress Speaker, Dr. Mgariev, and the Prime Minister-elect, Abu Shagur, and with the leaders of those revolutionary brigades. And we told them that unless something done about this city and make it feel comfortable, then this city will explode. And if the city does explode, that means that the other cities will follow. So I don't think we are far away. I don't think we are nearer to peace and prosperity, at least in the very near future, unless something is done drastically to satisfy people on the ground who feel that politicians are not really paying much attention to state building, and also those militiamen or these revolutionaries are becoming militiamen, and they're getting out of hand. And therefore, people sometimes they take the law into their own hands, and they do like what they did on Friday. And I think there is another demonstration is going to take place next Friday, and this with the emergence of the other cities in the east coming to Benghazi, and we might be another appointment for trouble again.
Sorry to interrupt. Do you think then that the young men who are in these armed groups are basically doing this because they have nowhere else to go?
Well, this is one, but again, the state, even though, I mean, the government yesterday, they said that Rafallah Hati, 17th of February, and Dar'a Libya, these are part of the state or the national army, but the indications, they are not. If you see them, you didn't see the marks of the army in them, and therefore people are asking, if they are in the army, why they are called what they are, and why they are run by these revolutionary men? Why aren't they run by top brass, by professional soldiers, and why they are what they are? Instead, they should have been in the army barracks rather than one of these brigades is residing in Gaddafi's farm in Benghazi. And people are asking very legitimate questions, and sadly, the government has failed in answering these questions.
Tarik Yousef, there is an economic dimension to this as well, isn't there? I mean, disbanding these militias is one thing, but the question then becomes, where do these young men go after that? They have no jobs. I mean, how do you get them reintegrated back into civilian life?
Tragically, there was a game plan that was proposed and even adopted by the former National Transitional Council and the outgoing government. It's a plan that included forming an organization that would look after the rebels and others who had fought and valiantly contributed to the war effort of 2011. Much of this plan had gone unimplemented. It fell through the cracks of a bureaucracy that was disentangled, and were actually even basic discussions around how to implement the various pieces of it. Demilitarization programs, integration programs, economic empowerment programs fell victim to the paralysis of the government. This was the lost opportunity of the previous 12 months. Now we have newly elected officials with new vigor, legitimacy, and a determination and immense pressure to deliver on the economic side. For the rebels, for members of the militia, after all, these are thought to be the first constituents of the emerging national army that will hopefully hold authority and will give to Libya's government the sovereignty that it is entitled to, that people are calling for. And so I would argue the next few weeks, the various steps, the initiatives, the political narrative, and more importantly, a changing reality on the ground is going to be very important and necessary for people to continue to believe. Otherwise, I think what Mr. Najam had suggested might in fact be what we will be facing in a few months from now after failure and lack of delivery.
Osama Kubbar, as someone who's worked within one of these armed groups, what in your view motivates these young men? Is it because they simply have nowhere else to go? Is it the need to be part of something? What is it? What is their ultimate? What is it that really makes them tick?
I think it's a combination of all what you said and a little bit more. It is certainly they care for the country, and these are the ones who really fought hardly and paid high price for the freedom of the Libyans. So they feel that they are really obliged to maintain their status, because the country is not really in a good position now to take care of itself. Lots of the institutions are not really functioning. I think Mr. Najam stated highlighted at the beginning a very good point and key point, which is basically the lack of trust. What is really happening in Libya, that there is no really trust between the regular people in the street and between those who really deals with the political scene in Libya and the different ministries. Especially with the defense and the interior ministry. So that's why all these loyal freedom fighters, they take it on their hands to maintain their stand for the time being, to make sure that the country is heading in the right direction. Job security is a major thing as well, and I think what Mr. Tariq said is a key point, and I truly believe in Dr. Mustafa Abu Shagur ability to try to resurrect all these programs back and steer the country in the right direction.
Faraj Najam, if I could turn back to you on this, there is an argument that's been made that a big share of the responsibility for this state of affairs in Libya right now lies with the West, namely the NATO countries that aided the uprising against Gaddafi, the bombing of Gaddafi targets, supplying weapons and training to the rebels and so on, and that they should have seen something like this coming. Do you share that view?
Well, no, I didn't think so. I think NATO did what they wanted, what they should have done. They went along with our wishes, and at this stage we do not wish them to intervene at all, because if NATO steps in here, they will just cause mayhem. We don't want that. I think we as Libyans, we are capable of doing it. Yes, we do have a problem of we don't know where we're going, but we make sure we get there before everyone else. This has become a Libyan slogan. But nonetheless, I think what's happening in the ground here, I think will bear some good news in the long run. It's the Libyans, they feel that they have a full ownership, but also they're managing their own affairs. There are serious problems, but they're dealing with them. And what we saw last Friday was good, actually, because those armed men, as well as the people, they tested each other, and everyone knows who he is and where to stand. And I think now we are going to go forward and start building this country together. And I don't think we should allow anyone else to interfere in our affairs, because if they do, they will just cause unnecessary harm.
Tarik Yousef, what's your view on this? Should the international community be doing more to help shape the post-Gaddafi Libya, or are you confident that the current Libyan government is up to the job?
I think the current Libyan government should be up to the job as far as marshalling all the political will, courage, planning, and the resources to put forth the 18th-month plan for government, for building state institutions, and I would argue also for building the nation again, Libya and Libyans. This is not to suggest at all, and I would come on the side of saying that the international community has a vital role to play, if only through technical assistance, know-how, best practice. There are many ways in which the international community can help in various sectors, whether it's security, sector reform, financial sector development, economic empowerment. One of the immense costs that Libyans have paid in the past 4 decades under Gaddafi was the loss of any real experience in how you manage real economic and social development, how you build institutions. And I think
all right, Osama Kubbar, I just want to give the last word to you in the minute that we've got left. I saw you nodding in agreement earlier there to what Tarik Yousef was saying. Are you ultimately optimistic that things will get better in Libya?
Absolutely, I'm very optimistic, and what's really happening now, it is something that we really need. We need to identify those who are with us and those who are not with us. I agree with Mr. Tariq that Libyans are capable of really taking care of the country and settling all the security issues in Libya, but we certainly need the help of the international community in other aspects, and I think they have done an excellent job in the non-government organizations. They really helped us establish that pretty well.
On that note, we've got to leave it. Thank you to all of our guests in Benghazi, Faraj Najam, in Doha, Osama Kubbar and Tarik Yousef. Thanks very much for your time, gentlemen. And that's it for this edition of Inside Story. Remember, if you want to send us your feedback, just email your thoughts to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. I'm Hazem Sika from all the team. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.